morning, everybody. How are y'all doing?
Good morning.
Good. Been a long morning for you guys, huh? Yeah, pass those that way. We got meeting minutes from last week's meeting as well as an agenda for this week's meeting going around, so give you sort of the structure that we're going with. We've got no new updates on safety. Cindy's been working on getting the OSHA requirements filled out, but we've got nothing new as of yet. The specialized material log for our long lead items, that's going to be uploaded to SharePoint as soon as we get that up and running, which should be in the next week. You guys will get login information, and next week we'll have an IT guy with us. So if you guys have any problems getting onto that SharePoint site, just let us know next week and we'll get all those issues straightened out.
Can you go back to safety a little bit? Cindy is the safety manager?
Yes, that's me.
Can you just talk a little bit about your experience, especially related to parks under operation, dealing with the public?
Yes. So some of the previous projects we worked on,
The cars land down in Disney
Yes.
Adventure Park.
the Parkland down there. I worked on the different safety plans, and because it was an active environment, we were sure to keep that in mind at all times. There were extra signs up for warning and that type of thing. Also with deliveries, that was a big concern. So I tracked a lot of those to make sure they were coming in and out and not interrupting the daily flow of the entertainment facility.
That was when we had the public access forum to inform the public what we were going to be and where we were going to be at all times. We figured public safety in there as well.
Building off what Pat was saying, we also had an open forum of communication. We had weekly toolbox talks in order to discuss potential hazards and lessons learned so we can move forward in the future, making City County safer.
Moving on to the schedule review comments. We've got the proposed accelerated schedule. You guys saw that in the binder. Obviously, that's going to be your viewpoint for most of the detailed information on that. Tim, can we go over sort of summary there?
Yeah, sure. Let me go over what we did to accelerate that schedule. The final accelerated schedule really came down to was about just over 23 months. It's about 23 months and about a week actually. August 9th, 2016 is now our completion date that we came to. We got to that by working down the critical path, kind of reverse, backwards, identifying some of the longer items and activities that were hindering and pushing back the completion date of the project, and worked out several different ways to shorten those activities the best we could to accelerate that and bring a shorter completion date. Those methods, the main method we used was a double shift method, which involved utilizing the working hours of the site from 6 in the morning to 8 in the evening fully. We did this for items that we saw that you couldn't necessarily throw more manpower at to complete faster. The items where you needed to work longer, you needed to get more time in per week rather than more people on the job.
So is there an overlap then in those two shifts, or how?
There is.
So
It's
the hours are 6 to.
It's an 8-hour shift and a 7-hour shift. It's 6 to 2 every day, and then 1 to 8. The 1 hour overlap we put in there because if you don't overlap the shifts, you have to clean up the first shift, and then when the second shift comes in, you have to set up again. So by overlapping that hour, we thought the productivity would continue throughout the day, and you wouldn't have any productivity gaps, and time would continue better.
How are you going to ensure communication between the two shifts to make sure that there are issues come with the first shift are identified in the second?
That's the nice part with the hour overlap is you have the second crew coming in an hour before the other one leaves, and they're going to work together for that hour to make sure they're handing over all the operations, everything they've done that day. The foreman for each crew will be working with the foreman for the second crew to give a report on what they've been doing, if they've had any issues, if there's any trouble spots for that day, to make sure that productivity continues for the full.
So the crew that's on the second shift is working 7 hours, they paid for 8 hours?
They get paid the 15% bump for a second shift. That was mandated.
So they get 7 hours, and they get 15% more?
Yeah, and we actually had it worked out that I think most weekends, they're also the people who work the 8-hour shift on Saturday, that we included with the schedule.
Also Saturday work?
There's also an 8 hours on Saturday.
So you got 2 shifts?
2 shifts, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, 6 days a week.
2 shifts Monday through Friday and 1 8-hour shift on Saturday. To avoid that extra 50% on top of overtime pay for Saturday, instead everyone was just overtime pay for Saturday to reduce the costs.
So for the second shift, you figured overtime and 15% or just the 15%?
No, because of the Saturday overtime, because it's a Saturday work, there's overtime already.
Right.
We decided against the second shift on Saturday
I see.
to avoid the 50% bump on top of it. That was mainly done for items like steel, theming, rod installation, things that you can't necessarily double the productivity on, so you really just need more time on site working. The other method we used was double crew. That was for simple, or I guess repetitive items where 2 crews can do twice the amount of work. Mainly MEP, rough-ins, framing in unconstricted areas, where 2 crews can do that double productivity, take that assumption. We also use double crews for the central plant, but because we assume that we found that to be a confined site, we reduced the productivity estimates on what could be done with that. The last method we used to accelerate the schedule, Andrew's going to tell us a little bit more about our prefabrication plan.
Right, Tim. So we've been working with the mechanical and plumbing subcontractors in the Los Angeles area, and we found 1 or 2 that have prefabrication shops off-site that are pre-established. And so by utilizing these subcontractors, we can get into their prefab sites for this project. And because it's an established site, that's only 75% of the on-site cost for this project. By moving that work off-site, we're saving money. We're going to reduce the schedule because we're prefabricating about 75% of the labor hours off-site in that main facility. It's going to be safer. There's not going to be as much work going on site. There's not as many people walking around, interfering, getting in the way of each other. It's going to be safer. It's going to be a cleaner site. And then we'll ship those deliveries. The mechanical and plumbing subcontractors will be responsible for those deliveries. They will coordinate with John and Tyler for our OFCI deliveries and make sure that we've got not too many trucks coming in on the same day with that, but they are responsible for those deliveries. We've seen this work well on our Cars Land project in Disney Grand Adventure. It takes a lot of upfront BIM coordination on the project, but once we get those spools set and we coordinate that with shoring for elevated slabs and that kind of thing, we really feel that this will be a way to accelerate the schedule while at the same time cutting costs by about $25,000 above the baseline schedule.
How are you going to monitor quality with offsite fabrication?
We've got a field engineer who will make weekly to bi-weekly visits to the facility because they're in Southern California, Los Angeles area. It won't be a far trip. He can make that visit, check over the quality that they've got, and before it comes to the site, so we can monitor and remediate any problems that do arise in prefabrication before they get to the site. And then any work that they install on site that does not meet our quality standards will obviously have to be ripped out and reworked.
I don't want to make any assumptions, but field engineers are normally greener, younger engineers that come into the industry. Who's training these engineers to make sure that they know what they're looking for when they're going to the fabrication sites?
We've got training set up in our central offices for younger engineers as well as continuing education for all field personnel. And the superintendent on the project, Tim, will be the main contact for him in terms of what quality he's looking for in this materials.
And I'll be speaking with him ahead of time to let him know that, make his judgments on the best of his ability. If he has any issues or uncertainties, let me know, and I'll make sure to verify that.
So do you plan to increase your salaried staff to keep up with the reduced duration of the project to maintain quality?
We'll get into that a little bit more in general conditions.
We considered that option, but we deemed it unnecessary. That the costs were a little higher than we wanted it to be for the acceleration. We think our plant staff will be able to handle the capacity.
So you're going to have the same staff working from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
and this work, this MVP work is mainly focused on the main facility MVP work there.
Regarding the schedule, first, congratulations for exceeding our request for 24 months. But I think it's worth noting that per specifications, we own all the float in the schedule. That's not for contractor use. So we'll expect that we're going to set interim milestones through the course of the job.
All right.
That'll be tied to your contract, and I just want to make sure that you all are confident that you'll be able to do that and offset any unforeseen delays we might encounter.
Of course, we're confident in that. Once we get those specs and we actually get a chance to read over them, we'll be able to set those deadlines in our schedule and set those milestones, and you'll be able to see exactly when those milestones occur per our schedule, and if those are not up to par with what you believe they should be, we can go back and fix those and adjust our schedule accordingly. We are, like I said, like Tim said, we're about 17 days under the 24-month schedule, so we do have a little bit of play in there, but to get to that 24 months, we believe that we can.
Maybe for the next meeting, why don't you rough out a draft of interim milestones, and we'll work on what we feel should be there as well, and work that out.
All right.
One thing that you'll notice, and I know with your experience in Carflane, you probably already know this, but people like Scott and myself really like to change things up at the 11th hour. So I don't know if you took any of that into consideration in developing the schedule, or if this is kind of a best case scenario schedule, or if we have a little bit more room to look at, as needed from a creative and architecture side.
This is actually why we set the goal of going under the 24-month. We want to make sure that we could, beyond our best comparison, to be well under the 24-month deadline, so that when there are changes or anything comes up, we have room to adjust activities and still maintain that deadline.
One concern I have is with submittals. We find that submittals are late on a lot of projects. With the decreased duration, how are you going to expedite submittals, especially without increasing the salaried staff manpower?
By working with our subcontractors ahead of time, getting them in early into the project and setting early deadlines with them that have monetary penalties against them, we believe that we can, force their hand somewhat to get those submittals in, and we can get those approved and forwarded to the architect for approval.
What about review times? What kind of review durations are needed by our architect to meet your schedule?
By your architect,
Easy now.
I can hear you.
how does 3 weeks sound?
3 weeks sounds good.
Sounds good?
To further expedite that submittal process, we have a cloud-based system where we update it on SharePoint so that everyone can have access to the right up-to-date information that they need.
Oh, you Scott,
All right, any more questions on schedule before we go on to the next item? All right. So the RFI log will also be on the SharePoint site when we launch it this coming week. And again, login information problems, we will have an IT guy here next week to get all of those sorted out. For the accelerated schedule, obviously there is going to be some increased costs. Cindy's going to go into that in more detail. Cindy?
So I put this chart up there for you guys to take a look at, just so you kind of can see what numbers I'm talking about. One place we did save money by expediting the schedule was with general conditions. We saved about $630,000. That cost is based on the monthly rental prices of a lot of equipment, trailers, that type of thing. And since we're shortening it by 6.5 months, those will be shorter. And then the cost to accelerate the schedule by increasing the labor and work staff is about $1.5 million. But when you average this out with the general conditions, it comes to about $850,000 to increase the schedule by 6.5 months.
So that's just a little over $150,000 a month, a little under 150.
Yes.
That seems like a really good deal to us. Any opportunity to get really aggressive and go for 18 months? So if we open, so we can make money.
That actually kind of leads into my next slide here. separated out each category that we did try and accelerate based on what the alterations they made to the schedule. So you can see here which ones are most expensive, which ones are more on the cheaper end to alter. So that would be a good tool to move forward if you really wanted to try and make it shorter. They will obviously increase the price, and playing with this and the schedule, we can see how much and how drastically that would change.
The main problem with going shorter and shorter is that ride and install time and all the testing that needs to get done, because there are going to be millions of people going through this ride a year. We don't want to cut that ride time any further, and that's one of the restricting factors that we've got on the project right now.
This graph here would also be useful if the design comes in and says that, this one should really take a little longer, or that kind of thing. You can see how it's going to affect the prices of each category individually. And then you're going to talk about the general conditions a little bit more, Patrick.
That's right. Please stop me if you have any questions with specifics regarding general conditions. I included in the RFP, we had two different ones. First one was, as included, the 30-month schedule beforehand, and the 24-month accelerated schedule general conditions cost. And in every category, it was decreased with the accelerated schedule. As far as supervision administration, it's less months on the site, therefore there will be less months we have to pay them. And temporary facilities, obviously, less time on the site is going to be less need to pay for them monthly, and also less man hours, which also plays into safety, which works in our favor. And we also had to include a few more line items in the 24-month with the addition of our offsite storage, which Tyler will get into later in the meeting, and also our binding sale tax, contractor risk, and insurance based on a percentage of the subtotal of general conditions cost. So with the lower subtotal, we also have a lower percentage of those as well. And our contingencies were actually, we increased those with the decreased schedule, just to be on the safe side. And I really included just all the things that were affected monthly. I left out the lump sum just for the comparison between the two schedules, just to give you guys a better idea. If you have any specifics with anything, feel free to let me know now or after the meeting. I'm going to pass it off to Andrew and see if he has anything on permits.
Patrick, regarding general conditions, how large is your staff?
Staff, we had 11 members staff.
That's 11 members full-time,
Yes.
7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Stagger that.
Yeah, we're staggering the corporate. We have two superintendents, obviously, for the two different crews, shifts. But they work as long as they need to.
So you're gonna have one superintendent per crew?
Yes.
A little extra overlap, to make sure.
To do that, to overlap, like Tim said earlier, they coordinate with each other.
With the amount of work going on, do you think it's enough supervision?
They do have supporting staff. This was our main staff, including the general division.
All right, no more budget questions here? All right. No, there's no new Veritech updates on permits. Do any of the pride staff have any permitting updates for us?
The city came back with review comments, but we have some time on this, so we'll have in a couple of weeks, or 3 weeks.
Okay.
What would be your drop dead date where we start impacting the construction site? We don't have permits in place.
Obviously, we do have that 17 days at the end of the schedule that we can play with, if that's where you want to play with it here at the beginning of the project. But
So I think we'll schedule a bit of time for construction days and stuff. So
maybe if you can add those critical dates into your schedule, that will help us track against that, make sure we don't lose.
Sure.
We always want the comments as we submit things on the last check.
Yeah.
Might take 2 rounds to get through it.
All right. John, what have we got as far as owner furnished logistics?
Alright, so with the OFCI material, as requested, we provided a delivery schedule for both the 30-month baseline schedule and the 24-month accelerated schedule. Here is all the items that we had to delay the deliveries for on the 30-month schedule in order to avoid getting on-site or off-site storage. With the limit of 5 trucks per day on site, these items had to be delayed.
So all these are in addition to 5 trucks, so say 819, there'd be a total need for
8
8
trucks, correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, yeah, these are the activities that had to be delayed, and we tried to pick the activities with the most float so that the project wouldn't be affected as much as those with, say, 10 to 15 days. A lot of these have somewhere in the ballpark of 150 days, and we made an effort to try to utilize the float that was in the project to begin with. With 130 trucks of this OFCI material coming from the East Coast, it's our goal to manage this as effectively as possible. Having no more than 5 trucks, it will increase the safety on site, and it will reduce the vandalism and the accidents that could happen from this material just laying down. And moving into the 24-month accelerated schedule, Tyler will tell you about how we chose the off-site storage facility.
How did you guys tabulate the data to make the determination of these things for the overruns? Just run through that.
Sure, so we picked all the activities and they were noted in the problem statement. So with the duration of each activity, we divided it by the number of trucks that was associated with that activity, and we added that from the start date, minus the 5 days for the unloading and removal of the material, and then we used that period and added it to each delivery, so you had a standard X amount of days after the delivery. And with these ones, we would, if you go and look in the delivery schedule, you can see that they were moved in order to cooperate with the requirement. Correct.
How do you plan on sequencing the trucks during the day, during a work day? As far as timing goes, I mean, obviously we don't want all the trucks coming in at one time causing traffic problems.
Right. So with, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can build off of that. Our off-site facility logistics, in regards to that, we have a delivery management system. Again, we're utilizing SharePoint. It's iPad compatible, so when updates come in about when a delivery is going to happen to the subcontractor, to the architect, to the construction manager, to everyone, to make sure that they're all on the same page and that we don't overrun our 5 truck per day capacity. Again, if anyone has any more questions regarding John's remarks, I'm going to move forward into our off-site facility logistics.
Let's touch back on the sequencing of trucks and everything. We are going to be trying as hard as we can to get these trucks in before the facility opens, obviously. Get them in and get them out before the facility opens for the day. So depending on the time of the year, that open date will change based on when the facility opens. And if there are deliveries that must come in during the day, we'll try and get those in as quickly as we can and get them out without affecting the flow of the facility.
Great. So our off-site facility storage location is located 22 miles away, conveniently in Chatsworth, California, or a Los Angeles suburb. It is within the preferential location confines, as stated in R51. It's 26,000 square feet, so we'll handle all items that we'll need to store in there. It offers us many advantages. Number one, it's essential to our aggressive 24-month accelerated schedule. Again, we will meet the 5 truck per day standard. Building off of John and Pat's comments, it will make the site safer, it'll be cleaner, especially with the number of crew that we'll have on site. No vandalism, no weather damage. Our delivery management system will take care of that. Additionally, Mark, you had a question earlier regarding on-site training for people overviewing the materials that we have. We foster a mentor-protege relationship between our superintendent and our project engineers so that they can understand what kind of things they need to look out for, what kind of things they need to know, and understand the full process before we throw them into the water, so to speak. Additionally, we have a couple assumptions that we made for our OFCI materials tracking month. We assume that core and shell finishes, for simplicity's sake, were included into interior finishes and interior finish deliveries. And lastly, although we did include gabled roofing into our OFCI log because of the use of FRP shingles, we excluded low slope roofing because that would be used UPDM or TPO type roofing, so it wouldn't be within our scope. Are there any questions regarding offsite facility logistics?
How long do you need this facility?
2.5 months. We will be paying for a 3-month lease. We get 2.5 months lease. So work out $40,000.
Any concerns with potential for traffic problems? Time and stuff. It's on 30 miles or something.
It's 22 miles. It's a 27-minute drive. We don't anticipate. Without traffic. However, we do plan on, as well as we can, organizing as many trips as possible very early in the morning so it doesn't conflict with LA rush hour traffic. But that is a consideration we'll take it.
6 a.m.
You had said you try to do a lot of your deliveries in the morning. You have 5 trucks in the morning and you're unloading that much material. How are you going to ensure that you have the correct material as per the project documents? It's not the wrong.
Again, that would go into our delivery management system. We have, as well for our punch list items, we have an iPad which we can update and check items. Again, that's tied in. So for delivery items, and whether it's scene 1 that needs to be delivered today, or the pre-show items or the FRP shingles, we can identify that in our iPad and we can update it in a cloud-based system so everyone can see what we're looking at and make sure that we have the right things, the right materials, and the job at the right time.
What measures are you looking at for the offloading of the materials? I think your tower cranes are going to be occupied, so you're going to be hard pressed with a lot of these materials on how to offload. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we will have lulls on site, forklifts, in order to move items around. Of course, the bigger items will need to be picked by our tower crane, but we'll be focusing more on that.
So we'd like you probably to develop at least a mock-up at this point of your tower crane hook schedule, so we can see where it's being utilized, whether it's if you're hoisting steel or having to move rebar. Or you're going to have activity all over the place, so that's going to be a critical.
Okay, and with the 24-month accelerated delivery schedule, it's really not practical without off-site storage. Again, with the deliveries with trucks more than 5 per day. So there are 2 things that we're trying to do with this off-site storage facility. We're trying to be efficient with the 3-month lease. That's really not too much in the scope of things. Over 24 months, 3 months is very reasonable. And being effective, it really accommodates this schedule and it plays to our advantages. So if there are any other questions about the delivery schedules, please let me know.
Talk after the meeting about that one. Do we have any updates on the QA/QC plan, Scott? I know we had talked that February 21st is the return date on that one, but are
We should be
moving along?
good with that.
All right. All right, that's all that I think that Veritech has. Let's go around. Pat, do you have anything else to add? Anything to bring up?
If you guys don't have any questions, that's all I have for today concerning general conditions.
I think you guys saw the benefits to accelerating the schedule cost-wise, and it is a relatively cheap cost for accelerating it by 6.5 months. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Good.
Mark?
I'd be happy to stay after and go over any specifics, or you shoot me an email.
Good. Scott? Jeff?
I'm good, thank you.
We can take care of everything. All right, so we'll meet again next week.
So that'll close the meeting. in line, so you guys did a good job of that. It was clear that you were the leader, handing it off to your teams, being unfocused at times, but getting straight off the path. You have to do that. Your use of handouts and visuals worked pretty well. You can have too much paper on a table, and it can be distracting as well. So, one thing on projection is it does sometimes take the focus away. So, in between slides, like if Tim isn't using a slide, but your slide is still up there, put in a blank slide in between, and it goes blank or something like that. Looking around, things like that, that helps. But everybody participated. Questions were handled pretty well.
Yeah, certainly. That was a good job. You guys played up to it well. Adjusted, the question and answer well. Well, until the end, you went around and if anybody had any other comments before we adjourned the meeting. It's always a good practice. So overall, good job.
I concur with what they're saying. Everything was pretty good. I think, and there's been one other presentation where I would have liked to have seen some your schedule represented, and just a quick walkthrough in the owner meeting, just to go through that. But all in all, good job.
Don't really have anything more than what everyone said. I agree with them, but it was good. I enjoyed it.
You guys controlled the meeting well. There were a few subjects that you didn't really dance around. You either moved on from it or said we'll talk about it after the meeting. I think that's a good thing to do, especially if you don't know the exact answer. It'll give you time to kind of do a little research and get back to the next meeting. So overall,
Yep, good plan, well thought out. I appreciated the fact that instead of moving on to the next subject, we didn't stop each May, answered Mark's question. It was totally cool, and throw you guys off your own. I do agree with Bob that it would have been nice to see some kind of schedule up there, some graphic representation to give us an idea of where you did move things. But you got some really good ideas with the prefabrication shops, and definitely had a well thought out plan. Well done.
Let's give it up for Virginia.